My name is Alexandra Pisova, and I'm very delighted to welcome you here today. First webinar of the joint webinar series to be held together with Science Europe. This is a very great opportunity. We are very grateful to have this opportunity. Today's webinar is dedicated to the topic of transforming research assessment systems. This topic of high importance in European research area and beyond. So obviously Ukraine is not an exception. So that is why to share their relevant expertise on the complex matter of research assessment reform, 5 highly experienced international experts are invited today to act as speakers. So each speaker will have an opportunity to present the information they presented up to 10 minutes. So it is already a kind reminder of a timeline. My role is moderated to keep us on track. Also, there will be a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so you are very welcome to prepare to be asked orally via this Q&A session, or you can also write them in the chat. So, as I encouraged you to ask questions in English and also even in Ukrainian, I would like to address a couple organizational and technical matters of today's webinar. First of all, you have a little blue icon at the left bottom corner of your WebEx app window. So here you can turn on interpretation channel in Ukrainian if needed, and you can also switch back to original sound anytime you want. And also this information I would like to briefly mention in Ukrainian. Second issue I want to raise is a recording disclaimer. Please note that this webinar is being recorded, as you probably know from registration form. But anyways, I want to mention again. So the recorded materials will be used to draft the report that summarize the webinar discussions. And also the recording will be shared via media channels, for example, YouTube. So participants who will be forced to leave due to security reasons will surely receive the recording. Therefore, in case air raid silence has been launched wherever you are, we are highly encouraging you to leave the webinar and proceed to the show. And the last technical thing, please keep your microphones muted from the presenters. So, having all these organizational matters discussed, I want to say that I'm very, very pleased to co-moderate today's webinar together with Lydia Borel-Damian, who is Secretary General at Science Europe. Lydia, the floor is yours to provide us with your welcome address.
Thank you, Alexandra. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to be here with you today and to co-moderate this session with Alexandra. I hope that the discussion and the presentations will be of interest to you. Certainly the topic is a hot topic, the reform of research assessment in many countries. And I want to thank Alexandra and the colleagues on the NRFU, of course, in particular, Olga Polotska as the Executive Director for her leadership in preparing all these webinars. As you know, this is part of, well, some of you do participate in all these webinars. We organize 3 or 4 webinars per year on a topic of interest for Ukraine, but as Alexandra said, this is not a Ukrainian topic. This is a topic that is of interest for all of us. So we have put together here a very interesting program today with speakers from different parts of Europe, and different types of institutions, funding, performing organizations, because the reform of research assessment is something that needs to be tackled by all. And also my colleague James Morris, who will give an overview of the work that we have been doing in Science Europe in this respect. So I think, Alexandra, I will get it back to you. Good morning, everyone, and I hope that you enjoyed the discussions.
Thank you very much, Lydia, for your kind and wise words. We do really appreciate that. And now I'm very pleased to give the floor to Andrei Kuznetsov, First Deputy Director for Grant Support at the National Research Foundation of Ukraine, for his welcome address. Andrei will be speaking Ukrainian, so every non-Ukrainian is very welcome to turn on interpretation in English. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Олександра. Шановні колеги,
On behalf of the National Research Foundation of Ukraine, I'm delighted to welcome you to the fourth joint seminar organized by the National Fund and Science Europe. First and foremost, I would like to thank our partners and Science Europe for their fruitful cooperation and the support for Ukrainian scientific community. Thanks to this joint initiative, we have the opportunity to discuss topical issues in the development of science, exchange international experience, and promote the integration of Ukrainian researchers into the European research area. The topic of today's webinar, the transformation of research evaluation system, criteria, quality, and societal impact is extremely relevant. Many countries around the world are currently re-evaluating their approaches to the evaluation of scientific research. There is a growing understanding that the scientific value of research cannot be measured solely by quantitative indicators, and that effective evaluation systems must take into account the quality of research and such like integrity, openness, and contribution to society contributions. For Ukraine and the National Research Foundation as a grant awarding body, these issues are also of particular importance. And amid the challenging conditions of wartime, we continue to develop our research system and seek the best approaches to supporting high-quality research and talented researchers. This is precisely why learning from international practices is of immense value to our research community. And it is valuable not only for the fund, but for the whole community in total. I am convinced that today's discussion will serve as a useful platform for exchanging knowledge, new ideas, and practical insights, because we say that today in Ukraine we create the single ecosystem, and the fund is only one element of this ecosystem, and in general the approaches legislation should be the common and should correspond to the needs of the scientific community. And I hope that today the Ukrainian scientists and researchers will hear today some useful information, and the National Fund of Research and the scientists who join today will use this knowledge during the future competitions, during the conclusions, and I wish all participants a fruitful and productive session, and I give the floor to Alexandra. Alexandra, I wish you success today. It's a very difficult task, and I hope that you will cope with it and everything will be okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this encouraging and inspiring speech. So I'm very, very happy to say that we have really exciting agenda ahead. And finally, let's get started. Please welcome our first speaker, Elizabeth Holm, Special Advisor at the Independent Research Fund Denmark, CDFF. She will share with us information regarding how to approach the reform process, the career strategy and policies that are implemented in the Independent Research Fund Denmark, and strategy and policies that are planned to be implemented. Elizabeth, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the invitation. As Alexandra said, I am employed at the Independent Research Fund Denmark, where I'm responsible for our international collaborations and our main call for proposals. I'm also the program manager of our implementation of the ARA agreement since 2022, when we signed the agreement. And since last year, I've been a co-chair of the Danish National COARA chapter. I'm really happy to be here. A few words about the Independent Research Fund to start off. It is one of 3 public foundations in Denmark, and we grant around 270 million euros per year. Around 60% of this goes to bottom-up research projects based on the researchers' own ideas, and the remaining 40% goes to politically determined themes. So today, I'll try to give you a very brief overview of how we are revising our research assessment and the key lessons that we've learned so far. We don't have all the answers. We definitely didn't find all the answers. So I'm not talking. I don't have all the answers for you, but I want to share our lessons with you because reforming research assessment is a shared challenge, and we need to speak to each other and share ideas and share experiences. I'm of course aware of the extremely difficult situation that you are in Ukraine due to the war and the limited resources in general, but I still hope to inspire you to take action, and small actions matter too. So why do we want to change the way that we assess research? It's because we get the research culture that we assess for. So, you know, researchers tend to respond to incentives. This means that the assessment systems that we use, they influence both what research is done and how researchers' careers develop. There's also an issue with metrics. It's not that they are useless, but what they are often used for, they're often used for things beyond what they were designed for. So generally speaking, we, and I think the COARA signatories in general, want to improve research quality by improving our assessment. So what are we trying to change at the Independent Research Fund? Well, our main purpose at the Independent Research Fund is to fund original and groundbreaking research that supports the development of the Danish research landscape. I did want to mention here that our calls are open for international partners, excluding Russian and Belarusian institutions since the start of the war, but all other international partners can apply, provided that the projects in general benefit Danish research, but you can apply as partners. Our work with COARA, we see that as a sort of a service check of our assessment. So we want to make sure that our process and tools reflect that, firstly, our aim is to fund the highest quality of research project, but quality can look different across disciplines, and there is no single model researcher. This means that we want to be able to recognize the full spectrum of research contributions and roles and outputs that are relevant and important to the research. So reforming research assessment is not about lowering standards, it's about broadening recognition. So what did we actually do? I don't have that much time here today, so I can't go into details, but I will give you a very, very brief overview. I'm happy to share more details with you. I also added the link on the right-hand side of this slide. I added the link to our COARA page, where you can find our action plan, an FAQ, and contact info for the Danish chapter. I also added a link to our news item from earlier this year about the revised formats and criteria that we implemented. So we've been working on this, honestly speaking, since 2022. We published our action plan in 2024 following a long internal process. And it isn't really until this year that we actually had something to showcase, because the process has been long. We've had internal working groups in the office of the fund. We have a reference group comprising members of our board and members of our scientific councils. We've also discussed a lot of things with other stakeholders, in particularly in Denmark, but in Europe in general. So this year we implemented with the course that we published in March. We implemented a new CV format. It's a semi-narrative format, which has, apart from the standard categories, it has fixed categories for describing things like career breaks, career context, collaborations, contributions to the research community and the wider society. We also introduced a new publication list format. We call that a track record. And this includes the possibility to include different kinds of outputs beyond just classical publications. So there's a section where you can include whatever outputs you want. We also encourage the researchers to, if relevant, describe the publication traditions within their specific scientific area, because we've learned that this varies a lot. As mentioned, we have scientific councils. We have 5 scientific councils. We also have ad hoc committees. So these councils cover all scientific areas. So when they make the funding decisions, they need to look at different kinds of application from different scientific areas. And what we found out was that the traditions vary a lot, even within councils where the areas are somewhat related. So apart from that, we revised our assessment criteria in our calls to make them broader and more open. And we did this to reflect that there are many different types of projects. A research project doesn't have to look in a specific way. And we wanted to move away from a list of criteria, which in some cases could be interpreted as a sort of checklist, and towards criteria that can be applied when relevant and to the extent relevant for the project in question. We also wanted to strengthen the focus on the original idea in the assessment criteria, and we wanted to reduce the focus on the PI's merits in isolation and place more emphasis on the group's merits in relation to the project in question. We also revised the template that we use, that our assessors use when they make written pre-assessments. So we made a new template which is now linked directly to the assessment criteria and the categories of the assessment criteria. Apart from that, we have had a bias training for everyone at the fund. So our board, our reviewers, the office members, and the ad hoc members of the fund. And we will be continuing that in the coming years for the newcomers in order to give them the tools to address bias in their discussions. We also strengthened the transparency about our assessment procedures by publishing some documents on our website that have previously only been internal documents. And then we spent a lot of energy contributing to the establishment of the Danish COARA chapter. It was, as I mentioned in the beginning, it was established last year, but we've been working on it since 2022, 2023. So we're very happy to see that bear fruit. So what we haven't done yet, as we planned in our action plan, is that we are working on revising our assessment procedures. We have had separate assessment procedures for each council and for the committees, and we want a common assessment procedure that reflects the principles and the commitments in the ARA agreement, as well as maybe bias considerations and other relevant things. We're looking at other funders' assessment procedures and building on that. And apart from that, we are revising the requirement for our project descriptions, and we're just starting that work as well to make sure that they reflect the things that we want the researchers to assess. Yes. I wanted to talk a bit about how we approached the process and what we learned. So we didn't begin with a perfect solution. We thought it would be easy to translate the ARA agreement into an action plan. But it wasn't really. We took a lot of time reflecting on how to do that. And we realized quickly that there is no one size fits all. So we needed to adjust it to our system, our needs, and the specific relevant considerations that we had. That being said, there are so many organizations who are currently revising their research assessment, and it was important for us and for the board of the fund from the beginning that if, to the extent possible, we wanted to align with others. For instance, by using the same formats. We're not quite there yet, but the discussions are so fruitful, and the network is really helping us in this regard, and the Koara movement in general in Europe. So we started out by having conversations with other funders and universities in Denmark, and as I mentioned, we hosted a lot of internal workshops at the fund in order to build the foundation for our plan. Some of the things that we thought was difficult, has been difficult in the process. Researchers, reviewers, administrators, and leaderships all have different perspectives. And if you want to change something and reform something, people need to understand why the change is needed. And as the project manager, I can honestly say that cultural change is way harder than changing forms and guidelines. This is a long process, and it will go on for years. So while many people agree that assessments should improve, fewer agree on exactly how. And even if maybe the leadership in the fund agrees, not all of the assessors have the same perspectives. Also, some disciplines, for instance, can rely more heavily on metrics than others. So when we want to introduce common formats that can be used across disciplines, how can we find a format that is usable, can be used across disciplines and still respects the necessary differences. So these are some of the things that we have been discussing a lot. Well, while respecting that contexts, of course, differ greatly across Europe, and that Ukraine faces a lot of challenges that many of us in the other countries don't at the current moment, I wanted to say the following to you. While, of course, you need to allocate resources to implementing the changes, it is not mainly a question of resources to reform research assessment. It's more about creating assessment systems that recognize valuable research in a fair and transparent way. And I honestly think that every organization can take a first step. You don't need a large budget, and more importantly, you don't need to implement everything in order to start improving. It's also important to say that you will learn and adjust things along the way. We tried out many things, and we found out that didn't work. So we changed the plan several times along the way. That's just the way it is when you change things. And my main point here is it's good to learn from others. So if we can align, it's good for the researchers. It makes things easier for them. So it's learn from others, talk to them, steal their ideas. It's everything goes here. It's good for the community. I did want to mention, though, that it is necessary, of course, to have the long-term leadership support for these changes, because without that, it's impossible to implement changes. So my last slide is a couple of concrete ideas that I wanted to share with you. I would advise you to start looking at what if you're from a funder, right? Start looking at what the applicants are asked to provide, because this shapes what is assessed. Ask yourself whether your assessment criteria reflect what you truly value. Then you need to align your application materials, your assessment criteria, and your decision-making processes. a powerful first step to take could be being more transparent about your assessment procedures, just for instance, by sharing some of your internal documents or describing your processes more transparently. And the last thing I wanted to say was that the Global Research Council published their self-assessment tool this year in May, and it's really great. It gives you a framework for understanding what you can change and what you want to change. And I would say that if I had to start now, this would definitely be my starting point. So my final message is that research assessment reform is, honestly speaking, a never-ending journey. Start small, learn continuously, and bring your research community with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rolf, for your so wonderfully presenting the DFF views on rationale for revising research assessment. I think it genuinely helps to formulate correct motivation, aims, and the way to achieve selected goals. So I think the DFF key lessons shared with us are very, very inspiring for all the webinar attendees, just as you attended. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to our next presentation. Joining us next is Josephine Torresson, Senior Research Officer at the Swedish Research Council for Sustainable Development, Formas, who will be addressing the challenges of promoting societal impact through research funding based on the Formas relevant experience.
Thank you. Oh, then I can start. Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me and Formas to this seminar to share how we work with societal relevance and creating impact through our research funding. So my name is Josephine Torresson, and I work as a Senior Research Officer at the Swedish Research Council, Formas. And I work with many things at Formas, and for example, I've been working with developing our call for early career researcher or career support for early career researcher. So I will begin with a brief introduction to what Formas is and what we do, and then move on to how to share how we work with promoting societal impact through our research funding, and share some of the challenges we have had when working with societal challenge. So first, a few words about Formas. Formas is a government research council for sustainable development, and we are one of 4 governmental agencies in Sweden funding research. And the other ones is aimed for basic research about health, working life and welfare, and innovation. So our areas of responsibility include the environment, agricultural sciences, and spatial planning. Besides funding research and innovation, Formas develop strategies, perform analysis, and conduct evaluations. So in short, Formas allocates approximately about 2 billion Swedish krona, or around 200 million euro per year, to research and innovation. We do this by organizing around 25 separate calls each year. And in 2025, we funded 429 projects of varying sizes and durations. In total, we currently have around 1,600 ongoing projects that have been funded over the years. To organize and manage our operations, Formas has approximately 100 employees. I can see that it's 110 on the screen, but it's around 100 employees in total. Formas sees funding as a part of a larger mission to support sustainable development. Although funding is the part where we spend the most of our internal resources, we also engage with funded projects in different ways and arrange a lot of different communication and outreach activities. For example, we organize seminars and webinars, conferences, and other types of activities to communicate research results. Besides this, Formas also develop strategies, perform analysis, and conduct evaluations that we connect our communication activities to. Yes. But however, I will primarily focus on how Formas work to promote societal relevance in our research funding. We are fortunate to have a wide range of instruments that we can use to fund research and innovation. For example, we have calls for research projects, open or thematic. We have instruments to fund innovation projects. We can find policy labs, calls for career support for researchers early in their careers. And we also can find fund implementation and communication projects. And we also have instruments for funding research schools and interdisciplinary and cross-sectoral research centers. Across these instruments, we apply different types of evaluation criteria, of course, depending on what we aim to achieve. However, what they all have in common is that they include an assessment of societal impact in one or another way. So for our thematically targeted calls, where we fund research that is expected to contribute to a specific societal challenge identified in the call, we promote societal relevance in several ways. One common approach used in many of our calls is to require collaboration with external stakeholders in the project proposal, which means that stakeholders should be involved in the research and innovation process from start, something that we believe strengthens the potential of realizing societal benefits. We typically require that each project includes at least one project partner from the private, public, or nonprofit sector who actively participates in the project. These partners may either apply for funding from Formas for their participation, because we can fund other partners than besides universities, but they can also contribute in kind with their own researchers, within our resources if they want to. In these kind of calls, we include an assessment criteria that emphasize the potential for societal impact. This is usually 1 or 4 assessment criteria in these kind of calls, even though potential for societal impact is often included in other criteria as well. We have also, for some of our calls, we have also introduced tailored CV formats designed to suit different types of participants, including those who don't have an extensive publication record or scientific articles. Participants working in the private or public sector, for example. I would also like to emphasize that we always assess applicant CVs in relation to our evaluation process. And in relation to the roles in the project. And usually we do not allow the use of citation metrics or similar indicators in our evaluation processes. In addition, we often include the project's planned outreach activities as part of the assessment in order to encourage projects to ensure that both their implementation and results reach relevant audiences, create impact, and can contribute to the societal challenge in question. We also are also working with promoting societal impact in practice in our open calls, where only researchers may apply for funding based on their own ideas. This is also calls that we call bottom-up calls within Formas areas of responsibility. We try to make sure that societal impact is integrated in these kind of calls as well. For example, through the assessment criteria, which includes a criterion on potential societal contributions. Here we are currently developing the criterion and the instructions for applicants to help them become more specific with their outputs, outcomes, and potential impacts, as well as what activities they are planning to support and how they will work to translate their work to outputs, results, and to transform them from outputs to outcomes. Depending on the project, activities may include publishing datasets and methods openly available in repositories using, for example, participatory methods or communicating results to target audiences. But we also support societal impact through the way we have structured the CVs for these kind of calls that nudge researchers to describe the relevant experience and expertise rather than listing publications. We are increasingly using a CV format that allows for encourage including experience and expertise in the CV on, for example, expertise on, for example, collaboration, outreach, or open science. We also have a cap on the number of scientific publications that researchers may include, which is no more than 10 per person in these kind of calls. I also want to share that our instruments are regularly evaluated, but both continuously and externally. So although I have described how Formas has worked to promote societal relevance in the research funding, and we have done so for many years, I would also like to highlight that a lot of external evaluations have raised some criticism during the years, saying that Formas could do even more to promote societal relevance in our funding. For example, to better link our investments to existing societal needs, and we should do so particularly in our targeted calls. So how have we responded to this? Following a major evaluation a few years ago, which covered around 1/3 of our calls, we have increased our work and have continued to strengthen our work on societal relevance. For example, following this evaluation, we have developed new types of funding instruments, such as what we call policy labs and a call where only municipalities and regions in Sweden can apply as the main applicants, with project challenges based on actual and local needs that they have, and then they should include the researchers contributing to address them. We have also advanced our work in communication and outreach activities. I also want to share that this has not always been easy, and it is some challenges. It has challenged us on how we work. And for example, this work requires some additional staff resources compared to how we have worked before. However, we try to work efficiently by making use of existing platforms and contexts, participating in conferences that are already being organized, and avoiding the creation of entirely new communication channels. These networks helps us to disseminate research results through their channels and websites, and in this way we have been able to strengthen our work on societal relevance significantly without increasing staff numbers. Yes, so with that, I would like to thank you for the attention, and I will be happy to answer any questions afterwards. And you're also very welcome to contact me or Formas afterwards, and you can find my contact details here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your important insights. I would like to say that the Formas Toolkit seems to be a really great example of making the research assessment reform results successfully come into life. So it's really amazing to hear about that. And I want also to remark that the problem you have raised seems to be even much broader issue in the Ukrainian context, the event of Ukrainian European Union integration. a sustainable development goal should be of our high priority. Thank you very much. Without further ado, I want to say that our next speaker is Matthias Kisselbach, Director at the German Research Foundation, the DRG. He will introduce us to information about the respective experience of the DRG in the field of research assessment reform, and he will also share information about the output of one of the COARA working groups. Matthias, is yours.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, and thank you also to Andre and to Lydia and Adrien for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to talk about these things, and it's an honor to speak to a group like this. So thank you very much for having me. I hope you can see the slides. I will briefly, but very briefly, because Lisbeth has already set the stage, talk about the basics of the research assessment reform, and then go on these two things, namely what has the DFG done recently on the path towards more responsible research assessment. And then I will share some insights from a COARA working group, namely the COARA working group of funders, of which, by the way, the NRFU was also a member in the person of Olha Polotska. So just the basics, and just very briefly, what are the problems in research assessment and why are we doing all these things? And the basic line is basically this: if research assessment is too focused on metrics, and particularly journal-based metrics, then it can fail to identify excellent science, namely the kind of science that is performed by people who don't play the numbers game, who perhaps publish software, code, or work on infrastructures, rather than only putting out journal articles. And it can also come to wrongly identify perhaps ordinary science as excellent, namely the kind of science that has played the numbers game, but may not be groundbreaking as other kinds of science may be. It can thus harm excellent researchers, namely those who play a different game, so to speak, than just putting their energies into the publication of journal articles. And it harms science as a whole by making science less broad, less creative, also less efficient, and by promoting an unhealthy research culture, namely the publish or perish research culture. So that's basically the problem that we are addressing. There's lots of evidence about this happening. I won't go into detail, but I'm very happy to share my slides afterwards if you want to follow up a little bit. There's also lots of evidence on the pernicious effects of problematic research assessment culture on the publication sphere. Because there, of course, also the publish or perish culture brings out the worst in publications, in publishing houses. And this also I will not go into detail about, but I'm happy for you to follow up later. So that's the background in front of which a number of initiatives have called for reform. And basically, the two demands of these initiatives have converged to be this. When assessing research, be it manuscripts, be it proposals that we receive as funders, a broad diversity of types of output and activity should count. Not just journal articles, also other kinds of things, software code, data sets, work on infrastructure, what have you. All these things should count because all these things are important for science. And secondly, assessing research should be done in a predominantly qualitative way. The use of quantitative proxies can help, but should be done very, very carefully and as little as possible. So these are the two demands. And that, in a nutshell, was the sort of the background of research assessment problems and research assessment reform. I will now go to the second part of my talk, which is the DFG's tradition of qualitative review. And I think that we are well placed to talk about this because we've done research assessment in a qualitative way and talked about these things for a long time already. So as early as 1998, we put out a memorandum on safeguarding good scientific practice, and already there, almost 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we have talked about the fact that originality and quality in ideas should take precedence over quantity. And we have discussed the risks and downsides of quantitative modes of assessment. The same was basically echoed by the Senate Commission for Clinical Research. And as you may know, in the medical fields, these sort of problems of research assessment culture are particularly persistent. And in 2010, we have finally taken the first real step in our assessment practices by instituting a maximum of 10 entries, 10 publications that applicants can list in their applications and CVs to give precedence to quality over quantity. In 2022, we have followed up. This was just before the foundation of COARA, actually. We have put out a policy package supporting quality assessment, qualitative assessment further, and that has 3 elements. And I will go briefly into these 3 elements. Namely, we have also, like the colleagues in Denmark and Sweden, introduced novel CV templates with optional narrative elements, where you can talk about your biography or activities in the research system. We have introduced the demand on applicants to not just list their previous publications, but summarize and link them to the current proposal. And we are now asking reviewers to take seriously the full breadth of research contributions beyond just articles. So if we just look at it briefly, this is a snapshot of the new CV template. As you can see, it has optional elements on the way the applicant's career has progressed, what the applicant has done in the research system that may not otherwise be visible, and also how the applicant has supervised other researchers. The CV templates also include another innovation, namely 2 distinct categories of scientific output. And basically the idea here is to prevent the one category from cannibalizing the other. The first category is basic stuff, so that's peer-reviewed articles and journals. We have a second category that's basically any other form of research output that may not be visible otherwise, but relevant to science. Both are limited to 10 entries. And the idea of having a category B is basically to prevent people filling category A with just journal articles. So we want to be we want there to be a safe space for other outputs that are definitely visible to the reviewers. That's the innovation in the CV templates. And as I said, we are asking the applicants to not just list their previous works, but to discuss them and to link them to the proposal at hand. That makes the review more qualitative by itself and also sort of channels the thoughts of both applicants and reviewers. And then we are doing similar thing. We're asking reviewers to really look at the ideas and contents of a proposal rather than do numbers crunching. So that's basically what we have done. We are also doing other things on the field of cultural change. I don't have the time now to go into it because I was also asked to talk briefly about a COARA working group, namely the working group Improving Practices in the Assessment of Research Proposals. That is the COARA working group that includes the funding agencies mainly. And I was happy to be a co-host, one of several co-hosts together with the European Commission and the Swedish Knowledge Foundation. And I can very, very briefly talk about what we have done there. These are all the members. And as you can see, the NRFU was one of the members with very valuable insights from the Ukraine. So to some of the colleagues here, I'm not saying anything new because you have actually authored the paper alongside us. The paper is now out, and I welcome you to take a look if you want. It's a very long and comprehensive paper. It's 140 pages of discussion, ideas, and plenty of practice examples from all over the world. These may be the most sort of interesting bits of the paper. If you have time and interest, do have a look at this. And if you don't, then perhaps my very brief overview is enough. So basically, it tries to answer two questions. The first is this one: how can funders foster the diversity of research contributions, activities, and careers? And here are some of the ideas that are discussed in the report. So the working group is asking funding agencies to reflect on whether the review criteria are sufficiently open for all kinds of contributions. So just one example that's sometimes falling off the cliff is projects that work on, say, replication studies, because this is sometimes considered not sufficiently sexy by reviewers. So are the criteria open enough to also allow for these kinds of projects that may be really important? Reflect, second bit, reflect on whether the programs and competition spaces are sufficiently open for a diverse range of contributions and activities, because we all have different funding lines and sometimes there are gaps between them. And this is a very important and sometimes overlooked field. Be as clear and transparent as possible in the description of the criteria and processes. Lisbeth has also discussed this bit in her talk. Design the proposal and CV forms to encourage a broad variety of research outputs. That's something that I have covered when I talked about the DFG experience. Welcome applicants with non-linear career paths. Not everybody has a career in academia exclusively, but may come from other fields of society and therefore, for example, may have gaps in the publication record, but that should not speak against that person. Consider an applicant's qualifications and past contributions not in their own right, but in the context of the proposal, because what we want is excellent science in the upcoming proposal. We don't want to just value lots of publications. Recognize the importance of a diverse pool of reviewers. Different kinds of reviewers may notice different things in proposals, and that goes for different disciplines. So all disciplines should be covered, but also in the pool of reviewers, it's important to have people, depending on the funding line, of course, for example, who have a partly non-academic previous career. There are many kinds of conservative biases in assessment procedures, biases that make review conservative in the sense that it may not value disruptive science, but put emphasis on more of the same kinds of incremental science. And if these biases are identified, then they can be countered. Consider incentivizing open science practices and encourage applicants, wherever appropriate, to reflect on sex, gender, and other diversity dimensions in the project design, so in the scientific content of the proposal. These are just sort of some ideas to answer in answering the first big question, how to foster diverse research contributions. The second large question that we addressed is how can funders optimize qualitative review and discourage number crunching. And the first and perhaps most obvious idea is guide and train the reviewers as well as you can. Surprisingly, this is sometimes not really done. Make the work of reviewers as interesting and rewarding as possible. This is also something that should be taken much more seriously. Reviewers are usually motivated not by money, some funders like us, we don't actually pay reviewers at all, but rather by a mix of altruism and interest for the science. And if you take that seriously, you can make the review much more interesting for them and thereby make the review more qualitative and deeper as a result. When searching for reviewers, obviously make sure that all the aspects of the proposal are covered with suitable expertise. That's important for the proposal, but also for the reviewing experience. We need time to review. We need resources to review that should be taken as seriously as possible. And then something that I also encourage my colleagues at the DFG to do as much as they can, when they give feedback to applicants, be specific and be helpful, and also use the feedback to reflect into the community that research assessment is done in a responsible way. And finally, reflect on the different roles in assessment. That was, I finish with this line. One of the first findings was that a review panel is often only, so to speak, only as good as the chair of the panel, because if the chair doesn't do their job well and doesn't heed the principle of responsible research assessment, then the whole panel cannot do that either. So these are just some basic ideas that I want to share with you. And I want to encourage you again to read the paper if you have the time. Again, the most important bit in the paper may be the countless practice examples that we have. And with that, I thank you for your interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your kind words that we see on the screen. And thank you very much for your fantastic presentation that reminds us that there are a lot of harms and risks of old-fashioned way, quantitative way of research assessment, and also teaches us, the DG experience teaches us a lot of improvements to be implemented in the research assessment system in general and on the institutional level as well. So thank you very much again. It's really valuable information. Up next, let's welcome Laurence Alpri, research engineer at the Directorate of Scientific and Technical Information, the National Center for Scientific Research, CNRS. She will guide us through the topic of open science as a critical principle to be investigated in the focus research assessment reform in the point of view of multidisciplinary national research performance organization. Laurence, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I am very honored to share this panel with such distinguished panelists, and I will be very happy to discuss with the attendees later. So I'm going to share the screen. I think it's working. Yes, okay, so I work at CNRS, and I will talk about this institution later. And I am deputy head of the Open Research Data Department, which is working for the open science policy at this institution. CNRS is a research performing organization, and one. So I will speak about how we have implemented our open science roadmap and how we are moving on with the evaluation research assessment reform. But first of all, I would like to recall that since 2016, France has been fortunate to have a dedicated individual appointed to the Ministry of Higher Education and Research to implement the open science initiatives. This person is since a few years now the National Coordinator for Open Science for France. Hence, since July 2018, all higher education and research institutions in France were able to benefit from a national plan outlining the steps required to comply with this policy. The progress did not stop there. A second plan was published in 2021 alongside a rather positive assessment of the first plan, and also a policy dedicated to data algorithm and source code that was formalized in 2021. I just speaking of this because it's difficult when you are an institution to launch and perform change in your policy. So it's much easier when a national ministry, for example, or a national funding agency take also such policies. So it's a work that we can do and which works better and easier and faster if we are collaborative and if we all share the same policies. So I'm trying, yeah. And moreover, early 2021, UNESCO produced a text, the result of international collaboration, that proposes an agreement on fundamental concepts and the definition of what open science is, and the diversity of areas concerned. And Matthias also said that it was a diversity of areas of research that needs to be taken into account, as well as in the UNESCO recommendation, the best ways to implement it and the benefits this policy provides. So the work of UNESCO is more powerful because it needs to bring together all regions of the world and needs to agree on policies and best practices. So as it has been said, open science is not just open access to articles, text, or data. It is opening access to the methodologies used, documented protocols, to the description of material and technologies, as well as the results. After a brief review of the broader context in which we operate in France, I will quickly describe the institution where I work, CNRS. So I think Lisbeth was speaking about, no, it's not, yes, it was Lisbeth. A previous speaker was speaking about the difficulty of different panels. In CNRS, there are a lot of disciplines, and I can show you that there are 40 commission, disciplinary commission, and 5 interdisciplinary commissions. So that makes 45 commissions that meet twice a year to evaluate researchers and career advancing. So in a nutshell, you can see that it began since 1939, and during the years it evolved, including international collaborations and a lot of things also that follows history of research. And just very quickly, the organization chart, where we can see that open science on the left stands on this chart with a great position near the 10 institutes that are driving research at CNRS, and next to the very large research infrastructure and cross-disciplinary and interdisciplinary initiatives. Because as you can see, there are a lot of disciplinary. These are the disciplines these are the 10 institutes: biology, chemistry, environmental, mathematics, and and all you can read. So it's very important to address them all. So to be large with the criteria, as it was said before, and to put open science in a good position. So how did we manage? First of all, after the release of the National Action Plan, we released our Open Science Roadmap in November 1919. And then quickly after that, we released the CNRS Research Data Plan. And every year since then, we organized a dedicated event for the headquarters leadership in order to make them being involved in every step of the roadmap. So they review the progress on the open science roadmap and the research data plan. So this invitation involves the 10 NRS institutes that coordinate scientific research, as well as the general management and their closest colleagues, human resources, and all the management of the headquarters. So in October, before the release, this event was for the release of the Open Science Roadmap, a year after what we have done since then. And you can see that in 2021, we had a dedicated session for open science and evaluation practices, because you know that it needs to evolve. Trying to move my slides. So here where it stands in the Open Science Roadmap, and there are the links to each of the things that I'm talking about on the slides that will be shared later on. And there are English versions of all. So if we take a closer look at it, we see that we have a dedicated space for individual evaluation of researchers, including open science. So including the best practices. So it rings a bell with the previous slide that with the webinar, the event that was organized for the assessment of where we were on this evolution. So here is to showcase that open science actions and policies we are leading in our institutions are embedded in a broader timeline with broader collaborations that reflect the course of history itself. So you can see DORA, and we are signing DORA late in 2018, and then the release of our work, the UNESCO work, and hosting the Open Science European Conference with a large panel dedicated to evolution of evaluation, and then COARA in 2023 that we have signed in 2022, and then the Barcelona Declaration, and and the decision of CNRS of cutting access to all bibliographic tools that are not open, like the WOS. And I didn't speak of what came after then. That is for example, the Bangalore roadmap. I think people from Science Europe will certainly speak about this. So it's important to form or participate to broader coalitions to make decisions simultaneously with our own, in order to reinforce this decision and convince both management and researchers if needed. Above all, it is because research is fundamentally international, and it is crucial to agree on shared rules of ethics, transparency, and equity. So in France, it was easier, and I would like to repeat that we had been fortunate to work under these conditions, but history has taught us and is teaching us that things can change completely, and we may experience events we never imagined possible before. So this is a slide to say that, as Matthias spoke about, there are a lot of things to take into account that are not visible and was not visible in the previous criteria for evaluation research, but we need to undig them and make them visible, and that's why, and I will tell you later how we have managed this. And this is in a glance, but the previous speaker, Matthias, has showed it very, very well. Since 2022, we have seen the rapid emergence of various objects and actions that the research community had not previously encountered. And it is also the conversions and the dynamic pace of these developments that define the uniqueness of the period we are living in. So we are moving from having incentive on one measure, because, as it has better been said before, then the measure ceased to be the good indicator. And yeah, and this is also things that we have seen with the new policies in some countries, change of governments, change of policies, and then you need to work on resilience and you need to think the global collaboration with a different mind, but still collaborating, but strengthening open science, replicating data, enlarging the governance of the infrastructures that we are using. So here is a key, as a link to a webinar that you can see that was being held by RDA, and also a link to the paper. But let's go back to how we have done this in CNRS. And our roadmap released, Open Science Roadmap released in 2019, we have mentioned 4 core principles for individual research assessment. So it is the results themselves that must be evaluated, not the fact that they were published in a prestigious journal. So there were very wide criteria. For each of the work cited in the evaluation files, researchers must explain their scope impact. And that's what was Matthias talking about. Researchers are talking to researchers, their peers. So they need to showcase how and why they have chosen these work to for their files, and what are their personal contribution, what are they proud of it. So exhaustive list of publication is unnecessary and not wanted. All types of outputs can contribute to the evaluation: source code, preprints, data papers, underlying data, and you will see later that in 2023 we have enlarged also to other criteria. And all the works that are cited in the evaluation, if there are articles or if there are softwares, they must be, or data, they must be accessible in an open archive, open repository. So this is to tell you what we were already speaking about in the Open Science European Conference. Just to say that it's not only about Europe, and you can see that in one of the sessions we have enlarged to outside Europe, because these evaluation and criteria should be shared in the whole world, because research is being done with no frontiers. And then there were COARA, everybody, or maybe you don't, but I think here in NRFU, yes, but maybe wider not. There are the core commitments of COARA that are also in the same line as has been said before. But what is a plus is that they give us also how to proceed to this evolution of the evaluation. So at CNRS, they have overhauled the researchers' assessment reports. And as it has been said, we should begin with small steps leading to big changes. So first, the diversity of researchers' contribution is taken into account, and they have 4 different places where they can write whatever they would like in different thematics. So it's contributed to scientific advancement. This is the usual question. Then they can also emphasize training, teaching, leveraging and disseminating scientific knowledge, or innovating, transferring and valorizing research results, or managing or collective responsibility, which is like taking care of a data repository, open publishing platform, or whatever. Also, engagement in geographical, thematical, or functional mobility can be considered, and a researcher can add whatever they would like to be considered. And the complete list of publication is not required. and the committees are asked not to use impact factor at all. The narrative CV is the one that you can see. And although the changes are not maybe from day to another, but we need to give time to culture change. How did we manage? We have 40 committees, so we need to go to each of the 40 committees to speak to the president of the committees, the secretariat, to the people, and to say and to tell them, it was face-to-face meetings, to tell them why we are needing to do these changes. So in 2025, we had the first results of these changes. This is the career evolution from one category to another. So independently of all disciplines. So candidates were asked to average their points per category. They had 40 points to average in these categories to say where they would like the evaluation committee to focus on. And so they have made a comparison between the laureates and the candidates. So they can see that the laureates are in the same average as the candidates. So they were not preferring, the committee would not preferring contributing to scientific advances to other mathematics. And also when we see that we compare the categories where researcher have put more than 15 points, that means more than 10, because if its average is 10 each category. So a researcher have mainly the candidates have mainly put high notes on contributing to scientific advances. So there were more candidates that were putting higher notes on contributing to scientific advances, but it didn't change the assessment. So the committees took into consideration all of the four I say thematic, but it's kind of work to assess, so that you can see that even if there were 266, only 86 were laureates. So this is how step by step we are trying to improve the criteria and to improve the evaluation and to also monitor how it's working. So yeah, I'm over. So these are the 43 and 5 interdisciplinary commission at CNRS. So it's a huge work to do and to speak to them all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your sharp expertise. Thank you very much for getting us acquainted with this information. It's really valuable to us. It's essential, I think, to highlight the role of open science in the research assessment reform to discuss this. Also, in the Ukrainian context, it is very valuable because finally the term open science is established in the Ukrainian legal field, and institutions' obligations to ensure open access to the results of scientific research and fair data. So it is essential to describe how it works in the terms of research assessment. Thank you very much. And a very warm welcome to our last speaker, James Morris, Senior Policy Officer at Science Europe, who will be speaking on topic of connecting open science and research assessment reform for building capacity in the RNI ecosystem.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me clearly and see my slides. It's my pleasure to contribute to this important webinar. I'm James and I work at Science Europe, where I look after a range of policy topics, all under the umbrella of research cultures. And today I will briefly introduce a new position statement that we released a month ago that brings together the theme of research assessment and responsible research assessment reform, as already expertly introduced by the previous speakers. And another important policy movement, open science, which I think was the focus of a previous webinar in this series. I present this case as an example of how and where these movements connect and enable one another, but more importantly, that the reflections and recommendations made are as relevant to organizations and national systems that are very advanced and those that are less advanced or have less available resources or capacity. And I think, seeing that the time on this webinar is running out, I will cut to the main points. This slide is just to highlight that this is the culmination of a 3-year project. It began with a realization between our 2 working groups on research culture and open science that both groups were discussing issues that depended on one another, and that to advance in either area, we needed a joined up approach. And that this project will conclude this year with our position statement and a set of practice examples of how our members are contributing to a shared vision of this more joined up approach. And that shared vision is one where aligned assessment systems and the value of openness connect and enable research cultures where quality and excellence can flourish. And through this connection, research organizations can help to create strong research and innovation environments where diverse ideas, people and teams can most effectively contribute to knowledge advancement. So we did this work using the Center for Open Science Strategy for Culture Change as a model for inspiration. And we focused on key actions that can be undertaken at different levels that contribute to both driving research assessment reform and enabling open science. And the key to this pyramid and the culture change strategy as a whole is that actions build on one another and create incremental and careful advance. And this is important, for example, because a research funder that wants to support, say, open data sharing cannot just effectively mandate researchers that it funds to produce and publish data management plans without there being infrastructure in place to share them. And researchers cannot be expected to engage effectively in such processes if they're not given guidance, training, or support. And further, where these actions require time and effort, and they do, researchers should be recognized for those efforts, reflecting that it is a valuable contribution. And this is where and how that strategy for culture change is embedded in the recommendations that we make in the report. So firstly, we recommend supporting and linking to open and accessible community-governed infrastructures, a first step that makes engagement with many open science activities possible. Then we recommend establishing and support mechanisms for the community so that they can easily engage with these services, resources, and facilities, making it easy for the community. And as we already heard, there are great resources already available that can be used as inspiration. Third, when researchers are engaging with actions like open registration or the open sharing of research methods, they should be incentivized and recognized through assessment practices for funding allocation or career progression, making those actions rewarding. And finally, as these interventions become more common, we recommend integrating them into a strategy of scholarly communication reform by supporting systemic actions and policy change that strengthen scholarly-led and community-owned publishing models, including Diamond Open Access or other sustainable and transparent access approaches. I think most importantly here, we identified some cross-cutting actions, and these are applicable to all levels of that pyramid. Firstly, that clear communication and capacity building should be considered for all the steps, and for all cases where new interventions are made, there should be some monitoring to understand their effects and implications. And in doing so, we can normalize openness as a component of research and the research process, but also research management and governance practices. And by following this logic, we think that all research organizations can contribute in some way to creating change in effective and sustainable ways that bring the community on board, aligning on what is valued in our research systems. And that is how we think we can work towards realizing that vision that I presented earlier. For research funding and performing organizations, there are important roles to play in aligning key approaches, sharing good practices, and building a collective evidence base and learning from one another. And we also believe that these recommendations are a good basis for advocacy to other stakeholder groups. So highlighting to the research community what research organizations are doing to support openness and how they can contribute. And for instance, towards ministries or competent authorities as a means of showcasing how research systems can contribute to societies and economies in effective and efficient ways. Ultimately, going back to the initial research culture challenge of realizing what we value, and in this example, realizing our values of openness and transparency. So this is an example of how open science and research assessment reform intersect and enable one another, but I think it's also a case study that can be applied to other topics. So for instance, how research assessment reform can support key research integrity objectives like ensuring reproducibility and rigor. And we are now collecting a series of good practices that address the recommendations we've made, and we plan to showcase these in October through a webinar and a public web page. And I'll just close on a note that all of this work connects under our strategic priority of the evolution of research cultures, where we're looking at how our shared values weave into actions and connect with major policy initiatives like Kawara or the Diamond Open Access movement to positively shift research cultures, thereby enabling excellence and knowledge advancement. And for research organizations and national systems that are looking to build capacity, research assessment reform, I think this holistic perspective of research cultures is a great opportunity to build policies that align with your shared values from their inception, engaging with international policy movements like Kawara, where there is a lot of support offered by those communities that can help you build capacity and learn from other organizations. And so I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And strategic recommendations, and thank you very much for describing mutual impact of the open science and performance. Really important information. It truly highlights the important focus of attention in the activities not only of research funding organizations, but truly policymakers and research performance organizations. So thank you very much. It is really important, I think, to webinars attendees. So unfortunately, we are out of time and we are a little bit behind the schedule. But I think that we are moving to Q&A session. So please feel free to ask any question if anything is still needs to be clarified.
Maybe a question. Well, first of all, a big thank to all speakers, Lisbeth, Josephine, Laurence, Matthias, and James for their excellent presentations. And all for very nice presentations, really promoting real change. I think that is a very nice constant message from all of you that change is possible and that change is happening. and that we need the engagement of the research community, broadly speaking, in that change. I think it is very nice, and some of you, maybe like me, that have been for several years in the field, if we look back just 3 years ago, when Quora was created, I think we can be very happy with the maturity of the dialogue, how many conversations that were out there kind of under the table have now surfaced, and we have exposed the problems and the challenges much more openly. So I think this is a very good process, and we are, I think, in a turning or an inflection point where it is really time to go more massively into these pilots and tests to see what is the impact on the field. Huge congratulations to CNRS, because this massive action that they have conducted across this tremendously big institute in France. Really, I know it's far from being easy, Laurence, but it's so very good to see how you manage, and your enthusiasm and how this is really becoming a reality, change is becoming a reality. So my question to you, a little bit for all speakers, so you can, anybody can jump in, is like, well, actually 2 questions. One, how use testimonies that you have heard from researchers about arguments when things don't work, or complaints. So what is the point of the complaint? Beyond an individual situation, because that is, I think, the problem, no? That an individual situation gets all of a sudden propelled as if it was a systematic issue, which I think we should not fall into that, as much as individuals are important. But I think, so my question would be like that. So what would be the key points that researchers raised beyond their individual situations? And then maybe more for Lisbeth, I think, because she has talked more with non-academic institutions. So what are their points? What do they think the non-industry or non-academic institutions of that reform on research assessment? So yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, we had most questions from the selection committees, which are who are researchers and facing a lot of things to read, but it depends on disciplines. For instance, for some disciplines like mathematics, we didn't find any problems because they were already doing this. For some disciplines, and people will always look at biology, but in biology there are different sub-disciplines, and some of them are embedding the criteria. And from researchers, it's, I don't know if I understood well the question, but usually it's the same. They are afraid of having their progress, I forgot the name. Well, they are afraid of not going fast with their progress, so their individual career progress. But what I can tell you is that CNRS we release a reward every year. There are golden medals for scientific research and silver medals and bronze medals. So it's only on science, for science. And there was 2 years ago there was and it's not obligatory a researcher from CNRS. It's wider. So there was one who had a silver medal. There are a few silver medal and only one golden medal and many more bronze medals. And she's from a medical national organism in CERM, and she was delivered with the silver medal, and her colleagues, she reported to us that her colleagues were asking her, how come you had this medal? You don't even have a nature. You don't even have science. So it worked on the content.
Yeah, very interesting testimony you're bringing here. Thank you, Laurence. Yes.
I don't know whether Matthias wants to answer the question that was asked, because I
Yeah.
see that Alexander is and is
I
out
can
for
just
a while, but
briefly say I think I hear three kinds of complaints sometimes from reviewers. The first is that qualitative review is too time intensive. The second is that it may bring novel kinds of biases, not quantitative, but novel biases. And then a third complaint is that, well, if we are not allowed to judge somebody by where they have published or how much they have published, then we are wasting resources, because all these things build on quality judgments of other reviewers, and we should be allowed to rely on them because science is collaborative. They don't convince me personally, because there's a lot to be said against each of them, but these are complaints I sometimes hear. Yeah, I just wanted to bring this out. There are other questions and I could elaborate, but perhaps.
I can maybe add to that. I've been hearing the same things, a lot of things. Well, I've been hearing things mainly in our reference group and from our council members where the assessors are. So it's the same questions that they raise, like by including these other criteria, do we compromise quality? How can we use this new data, e.g. from the CV template? How do we use that in the assessment? How do we balance the use of the different data that they have available for the assessment? As Matthias said, the time, because we've been receiving, as probably most other funders, a lot of applications in the past years, and we've just introduced measures this year to limit the number of applications that required a change of the law. But we're very happy because the rise was just extreme, particularly in our health council, where we've seen a sharp increase in applications, and there just are too few people to handle that number of applications. And of course, that's a valid point. How do we include more qualitative data and indicators in a world where we have to read more and more proposals? That's, of course, it is a valid complaint, of course, and something we have to look into. And I've also heard phrases like, because we banned the H index as well. Our board decided to ban the H index as well. So you can include citations, but no other metrics. And this has been introduced this year, and we had a long discussion leading up to that, but the board made this decision. So some of our assessors do not agree on this because, quote, they're used to handling objective data, and quote, they're used to comparing careers and publication lists from different fields. That was said by one of the researchers, while the others said, well, when they do cross-council assessment, so interdisciplinary assessment, and we put together two researchers from different councils, and this was a researcher from the Humanities Council who's been assessing applications together with assessors from the Health Council. And he reported that every time he had to do that, they discussed like things like the health assessor would be like, well, this person doesn't have enough publications. So it's useless. This application is useless. And so these things do happen even though they claim that they're able to handle these differences. Another thing I wanted to mention here was that the question of early career researchers, it can be difficult for them because are they going to risk everything, risk their career by embracing this new world? They're really happy when we speak to them. They're happy about this change. It's important, it's welcome, and it's good for them. But will they jeopardize their own careers?
I wanted to bring just a small thing. I don't know if you agree with me, but maybe we could be okay with the fact that will always be biases in any evolution that we are going to do, but we are simply reducing them and also reducing them and diversing them, making them diverse so that eventually it will be equitable or like this. And also it depends, it will always depend on the committee. It cannot be, well, they are humans, and even if there were machines, that will depend on their program. So we are just trying, even if there are biases, to divert them and to make them be each one after another happening for that, so that every diversity of researchers can be well evaluated.
Very much for the responses. James, do you want to add something to the response?
Just very briefly on Laurence's point, I tend to agree. I think there will always be some biases, but I think that's where, and we see this now in the recommendations made in the Kawara report. And
just a very small comment to say, yes, I think we are bound to have biases one way or another. It's inevitable. So we cannot aim for a assessment system free of biases. I think it's virtually impossible. But what we need to have, and that's on the name of which we do it, is to have a system that is more inclusive and that is fairer to a diversity of paths and is not so uniform. Of course, on the way, there will be people that will complain, but the thing is that there are people that complain now as well. The thing is that they are silent and we don't hear them. And that's the problem, that the ones are used to the current system, they don't dare to say anything because, okay, that's the current system. So we need to persevere because that's the system we want. It's a more open system with the recognition of a wider, and yes, maybe not so many publications in science or in nature, but still very, very positive results for science, no? So yeah, I understand the reluctance of some, but the system is biased the same. I think that what is important is the photo finish, that the new system would be more inclusive. That is that our target, as soft and blurry as it probably is. Thank you. I think Alexander had a hand.
Yeah. But we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for. I have it raised for some time, but the discussion was really really informing and interesting. My question is actually related to the topic discussed just right now during the Q&A session, and I am from that side, from the researcher's side here, because I see that most speakers are, let's not divide two sides, but still you are developing the systems, and we are those to whom those systems will be applied. So I think current system, which is based on metrics, is it has its flaws. And of course, it's everything you say is reasonable and wanted. Yes, so qualitative assessment is really a target. But from what I heard today, perhaps it's my, to some extent, misunderstanding. But what I heard today is we are bringing the assessment of quality into the hands of reviewers. And those people are often, you called it biased, but I would say subjective assessment of the quality. Isn't it so? And is there a vision how the quality assessment can be done quantitatively? So we have clear and understood numbers for both sides, or measures for both sides that they can agree on. Yes, that's it. The quality is like this. Because otherwise it's a subjective thing and it largely depends on who reviewed the application. So is the question clear, or should I summarize? It's perhaps to Matthias because he stopped the most on the optional fields in the CV of DFG and so on and so
Right.
forth. And
yeah, I would try to say a few things. I mean, one of the things is that metrics, at least when applied to individual researchers, may have a feel of objectivity, but that is often only a feel of objectivity because they are also biased and tainted and sort of subjective in ways that are not immediately visible, right? So that would be number one, and I would really say that metrics, of course, have their place, but they have to be handled with care. And they sometimes work best for other units of assessment. So, for example, if you want to look at the research output of a whole institute, of a whole university, then journal-based metrics are indeed a useful way of doing that. But if you want to look at individual researchers, you have to be much, much, much more careful because these also simply don't work very well. So the other thing is, I think, yes, subjective, of course. I mean, qualitative assessment, yes, it depends very much on the individual reviewers. That is true. That's why you have to ask the right reviewers and you don't just ask one reviewer. And you have to have a form of quality control also in qualitative review, right? So, for example, at the DFG, and I'm sure the NRFU works similarly, you first ask one or two or even three external reviewers for written feedback, and then usually you put this into a committee, standing committee, review board, whatever you call it, which then assesses the quality of the arguments mentioned in the review. So this is a form of quality control that is absolutely necessary. It doesn't make qualitative review fully objective, so to speak, but nothing will. But it makes it more reliable, I think, and that's all we can aim for. Yeah, these are just two quick answers, but I'm happy to discuss further if you want.
No, thank you very much for the answer. I just my point is, if a small follow-up is possible, you say that the current quantitative assessment is also biased. Of course, we know the problems, but it is also transparent. And qualitative assessment, it may bring politics into the question. It may bring interpersonal relations and so on and so forth. If there are no ensuring, something
correct.
that mechanisms that make it work. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why a funder has
Thank
to
you.
have a strong scientific staff that takes care of these things as much as possible. But I sometimes talk to young researchers and I sort of think initially they must be fully on board with Quora, and I'm surprised that sometimes they're not, because they want to know exactly what they have to aim for. They want to know exactly what number of publications in what kind of journals they have to aim for, and they're sometimes dismayed when we tell them, look, that's not really what we can't give you that because we don't want that. And absolutely, it makes it a little bit harder sometimes for them. On the other hand, it brings them the freedom to really invest their time and resources in the way that they see scientifically fit and not sort of run after these metrics too much. So it's a give and take.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe I can just add, if you can hear me. To Matthias's point, I completely agree, and to the point that he highlighted in his presentation on the important role that chairs of panel committees play, but also the key role of training and guidance. But just to emphasize what Matthias spoke to, speaking from someone who's not a part of an individual research organization, funder, or performer, we see the amount of effort and resources and expertise in the staff of these organizations that go into ensuring that these processes are as fair and transparent as possible. And looking from a top perspective, I think that fills me with a lot of confidence that this qualitative approach is something that is really important for the next steps.
I see that it was
Thank
question in the chat, but I think it is already solved. As Lisbeth provided her response, thank you very much, Lisbeth. Thank you everyone for kind words in chat. So I think, unfortunately, we don't have any opportunity to proceed with questions because we are much before behind the schedule at the moment. So yes, I want to take this opportunity and express a really high level of gratitude to every speaker, to every attendee of today's webinar. It is a really great honor to host such an event together with Science Europe. Lydia, please take all my sincere gratitude. We deeply appreciate your professionalism, your support. We know that we will have really informative and very successful event every time we plan to host event together with you. So we do appreciate that very, very much. And at NRFU, we are really concerned regarding the issue of transforming research assessment. And as a proud member of QARA, we are always pursuing guiding principles. All terms and conditions are always developed considering the QARA guiding principles. So it is one of our biggest priorities. And having these discussions we've had today, it is extremely helpful to hearing it, making it public and making it high priority on different levels, from researchers to policymakers. We need to understand that Ukrainian research area shall be ready to go through ups and downs while learning from our international partners and gradually improving them. Thank you very much again to all of the speakers, to all attendees, and I can say that see you later, I hope.
Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you very much for co-chairing this event with me. And just to say, in addition to a big thank to all of our speakers and participants for staying well over time, that the next webinar will be on the 18th of September, same time, on financial management of research projects from grant application to successful implementation. So another interesting project, very smartly picked up by the colleagues of NRFU. So thank you very much. Have a great summer and see you in September.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.